Have you guys ever wondered why does big firms that produce a certain products hires big amount of labor when actually in other way there are few firms that produce the same product have less labor than the big firms. The same product could be bags, shoes, shirts, hats, etc. They obviously produce the same product, and there's so many of it. Well, some of them may say they do that to produce things faster. Also, some of them may say that it's the way to gain more profit. This example will make more sense for us if we understand the main idea on factors of production. In this video, we are going to talk about it, especially labor. In addition to making output and pricing decisions, firms must determine how much of each input to demand. Firms may choose to demand many different kinds of inputs. The two most common are labor and capital. The demand and supply of labor are determined in the labor market. The participants in the labor market are workers and firms. Workers supply labor to firms in exchange for wages. Firms demand labor from workers in exchange for wages. In a hypothetical free market economy, wages are determined by the unregulated interaction of demand and supply. However, in real mixed economies, governments and trade unions can exert an influence on wage levels. How about the general definition of labor? Labor is the amount of physical, mental, and social effort used to produce goods and services in an economy. It supplies the expertise, manpower, and service needed to turn raw materials into finished products and services. How important is labor? Labor is an essential and active factor of production. This is because the capital, land, and organization cannot produce goods and services independently. The gifts of nature will remain unused without labor. Only labor can utilize the natural resources more efficiently and can develop the economic well-being of the people, which in turn improve the economic development of an economy. All other factors of production will remain without any use if there is no demand for goods from labor side. Only when there is demand for goods, more goods will be produced to satisfy their demand, and hence investment will be encouraged in this process. Labor is the main source of wealth of our economy. Now we are going into the firm's demand for labor. The firm's demand for labor is a derived demand. It is derived from the demand for the firm's output. If demand for the firm's output increases, the firm will demand more labor and will hire more workers. If demand for the firm's output falls, the firm will demand less labor and will reduce its workforce. Demand for labor is a concept that describes the amount of demand for labor that an economy or firm is willing to employ at a given point in time. This demand may not necessarily be in long-run equilibrium. It is determined by the real wage firms are willing to pay for this labor and the number of workers willing to supply labor at that wage. A profit-maximizing entity will command additional units of labor according to the marginal decision rule. If the extra output that is produced by hiring one more unit of labor adds more to total revenue than it adds to the total cost, the firm will increase profit by increasing its use of labor. It will continue to hire more and more labor up to the point that the extra revenue generated by the additional labor no longer exceeds the extra cost of the labor. This relationship is also called the marginal product of labor in the economics community. The demand curve for labor will shift following any change in the determinant of demand, other than the wage rate. If the wage rate changes, there will be a movement along the existing demand curve. Here are reasons why there's a shift in the curve. First, changes in the marginal productivity of labor. such as technological advances brought on by computers. Second, changes in the prices of other factors of production, including shifts in the relative prices of labor and capital stock. Third, changes in the price of an entity's output, usually from an entity charging more their product or service. The firm's profit-maximizing labor demand decision is depicted graphically in figure in the screen. This figure grabs the marginal revenue product of labor data from table along with the market wage rate of $50. When the marginal revenue product of labor is graphed, it represents the firm's labor demand curve. The demand curve is downward sloping due to law of diminishing returns. As more workers are hired, the marginal product of labor begins declining, causing the marginal revenue product of labor to fall as well. The intersection of the marginal revenue product curve with the market wage determines the number of workers that the firm hires, in this case 3 workers. An individual's supply of labor depends on his or her preferences for 2 types of goods. Those are consumption goods and leisure. Consumption goods include all the goods that can be purchased with the income that an individual earns from working. Leisure is the good that individuals consume when they are not working. By working more, an individual reduces his or her consumption of leisure, but is able to increase his or her purchases of consumption goods. In choosing between leisure and consumption, the individual faces 2 constraints. First, the individual is limited to 24 hours per day for work or leisure. Second, the individual's income from work is limited by the market wage rate that the individual receives for his or her labor skills. In a perfectly competitive labor market, workers, like firms, are wage takers. They take the market wage rate that they receive as given. An example of an individual's labor supply curve is given in figure as shown in the screen. As wages increase, so does the opportunity cost of leisure. As leisure becomes more costly, workers tend to substitute more work hours for fewer leisure hours in order to consume the relatively cheaper consumption goods, which is the substitution effect of a higher wage. An income effect is also associated with a higher wage. A higher wage leads to higher real incomes, provided that prices of consumption goods remain constant. As real income rise, individuals will demand more leisure, which is considered a normal good. The higher an individual's income, the easier it is for that individual to take more time off from work and still maintain a high standard of living in terms of consumption goods. The substitution effect of higher wages tends to dominate the income effect at low wage levels, while the income effect of higher wages tends to dominate the substitution effect at high wage levels. The dominance of the income effect over the substitution effect at high wage levels is what accounts for the backward bending shape of the individual's labor supply curve. Many different markets for labor exist, one for every type and skill level of labor. For example, the labor market for entry-level accountants is different from the labor market for tennis pros. The demand for labor in a particular market, called the market demand for labor, is the amount of labor that all the firms participating in that market will demand at the different market wage levels. The market demand curve for a particular type of labor is the horizontal summation of the marginal revenue product of labor curves of every firm in the market for that type of labor. The market supply of labor is the number of workers of a particular types and skill level who are willing to supply their labor to firms at a different wage levels. The market supply curve for a particular type of labor is the horizontal summation of the individual's labor supply curves. Unlike an individual supply curve, the market supply curve is not backward bending, because there will always be some workers in the market who will be willing to supply more labor and take less leisure time, even at relatively high wage levels. Now I'm going to show you a data from one big and popular firm. As you guys can see from the logo, it's data from IKEA. Before we're going to the data, I'm going to tell you a glimpse information about this firm. IKEA is a Swedish-founded, Dutch-headquartered multinational conglomerate that designs and sells ready-to-assemble furniture, kitchen appliances, and home accessories, among other goods and home services. Started in Sweden in 1943 by 17-year-old Ingvar Kamprad. I'm sorry if there's a mispronunciation of the word. IKEA has been the world's largest furniture retailer since 2008. The group is primarily known for its modernist designs for various types of appliances and furniture, and its interior design work is often associated with an eco-friendly simplicity. In addition, the firm is known for its attention to cost control, operational details, and continuous product development that has allowed IKEA to lower its prices by an average of 2 to 3%. The data that I took from IKEA is the income statement from year 2015 to year 2016. The source that I took this data from is inter.ikea.com. On that website, you guys can find the annual reports and financial reports of IKEA throughout the year. This data contains of income, other income, cost of goods sold, about services, salaries and wages, social charges, and others. You guys can see on the screen. But in this data, we are going to focus on the salaries and wages. So we are going to zoom into 31 of December 2015. The salaries and wages on 31 of December 2015 is 71 millions of euros. And the salaries and wages on the 31 of August 2016 is 54 millions of euro. As you guys can see, there is a decrease from 2015 to 2016. Also, there is a decrease for the total revenue. So the conclusion that I want to give to you guys about this kind of data, I'm not going to give an assumption about what happened to IKEA on that year. But what I'm going to say is, if there is a decrease from one year to the next year, there may be a lot of things that happen. Maybe a lot of employees resign because of one problem, or maybe there is a workforce for them, or maybe their salaries are getting decreased because of the total revenue that kept going down.